Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Southern Cross Drive podcast, where we're focusing on all things Two Oceans half marathon. Really excited as always. I've got Coach Dev here with me. Devlin, how are you doing today?
Shona, yeah, very, very happy to be here. As always, looking forward to today's chat.
Yeah, we're getting closer and closer, Dev. I mean, I can't even believe we're in March already. Like January was so long that like no one even noticed how quickly February went. And so that's pushing us closer to race day. I know there's a couple of nerves out there, and exactly that's why we're here to guide you guys. So Dev, talk to us where we are now. Essentially 5 weeks out. What should we be looking at, and what are we focusing on now?
Yeah, I think, as you say, anxiety probably is a little bit high at the moment. People are stressing. We are getting closer to race day. I think just people must just keep in mind it's really not the time to try and cram train and catch up on anything you might have missed last week, for example. We have got a little bit of time to play with. We're coming into a recovery week this week. Which I think, as usual, always comes at just the right time. I know you and I were chatting. We've got clients that are all feeling a little bit tired, and not just physically tired, but also sort of the mental monotony of training and being on the structured plans and those sort of things. As much as it always helps and takes the thinking out of it, following a plan, there's still a monotony to training and being in the zone for something like this the whole time. So these recovery weeks always come at the right time. It's where we're just cutting down on that training load a little bit. We generating and building ourselves up a little bit stronger from what we've been doing. And really, the bulk of the training, if we have been consistent, is behind us already. So we passed halfway. So hang in there, guys. We are almost there. But yeah, the bulk of it's behind us. We do still have a little bit to go. So I say we're almost there. Hang tight. Coming out of the recovery week, we've got 2 more weeks of kind of focus training, or biggish weeks, if you'd like to call it that. A little bit more long runs still to come. But then we'll get into that 2-week taper where things then, there's a whole nother frustration, because now you kind of feel like you should still be doing more. Yes. And it's this fine line that we're walking the whole time. But yeah, I think first and foremost is this week is going to be critical with that recovery week. Don't try and add more in because you think you're doing less and you need to be worrying about more, because again, that just has this knock-on effect to your recovery later on, and it messes up kind of the training cycle that you're on. So make sure the recovery week is there, done properly, cut back on your running volume. I'm not saying you shouldn't be doing anything, but we definitely should be cutting down on the volume a little bit this week, possibly even cutting back just to the 1 strength session this week as well, not overdoing it. Letting the body just recover and have a little bit of a break. And then usually towards the end of the week, it's time trial as well. So it's something that we can play around. We'll obviously get into that in a second now. And I know a lot of people fear a time trial, but a really good kind of baseline for us to set things off. So yeah, I think really critical now is, like I said, in the last block that we will be moving into now, I think most people hopefully have maybe done 1 or 2 sort of longer runs, or definitely have done longer runs, but possibly done a race as a training run. So had a feel for the nutrition strategies that you will be employing on race day, your pacing strategies, your run walk strategies. So hopefully we've started refining that already, kind of checking off checklists, if you'd like, making sure things are in place, and you're starting to feel, hopefully, while you might be anxious around training, but hopefully you know that your processes and everything are in play, and in the right place. So you aren't too stressed about the actual strategies and the controllables for now, at least.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. And these recovery weeks are so key. And as you mentioned, an opportunity to perhaps do a time trial, and that does lead us into what I want to speak about next, which is, we're 5 weeks out from race day, but one of the things that's going to make you successful in race day is how you pace the race, right? So can you give us a little bit of an idea of, like, you mentioned using that time trial, and some of the idea. We can dive into some pacing aspects in a bit, but how do we use that time trial to get an idea of our pacing strategy?
Yeah, so the time trial being later in the week obviously allows us to freshen up before that time trial. So hopefully we are nice and fresh, and when we do that time trial, we're getting a really good effort in it, so we can just gauge roughly where we are. Again, there's still a little bit to be done from a training point of view, so there might still be a couple of changes. But if we can get a really good effort time trial out now, this just gives us a rough idea to say, okay, cool. I know a lot of people are already thinking about what their goal time on race day could be or what their potential could be. And this is a really good way to predict that. So to get a race predictor, a time predictor. And we've got a pacing calculator on the platform. There's so many different pacing calculators out there. Garmin's, even your device might even give you a race calculator. Not that I always trust them, because mine tells me I'm running a sub 3 hour marathon, which is definitely not a thing. So I don't know where it's getting its data from. But yeah, so I think the time trial is just a good gauge for us to say, all right, this is where we're at the moment. Just on the time trials while I'm on it, it's also, keep in mind, it's a snapshot on the day. You could have a bad day. You could wake up. You might have still had a stressful week, and something goes slightly off on that time trial. It doesn't mean you need to panic now and go, you know what, geez, that time trial was an absolute bomb, and I'm now going to have the worst race of my life in 5 weeks' time, because that's not the case. Yeah. I do have a couple of people that panic around time trials. Time trials is a snapshot on the day that you do them. So that is also just something to keep in mind. So you're not always expected to run a PB or a PR on time trial day. So please just keep that in mind. And then,
sorry, Devin, on that, I think it's key to note, as you mentioned, there's still 2 more biggish sort of weeks, that's a lot can change in the next 5 weeks as well. So as you say, just a snapshot of where you are currently. And exactly
that. So I was just going to say, so let's use that time trial. Don't see it as a pass or fail. So you can't fail anything here. This is just a guideline for, do we need to change anything in the weeks to come? So maybe a couple of things from a pacing prescription point of view in the training. So that's always those last minute changes that we have spoken about in the past. And then obviously to just roughly gauge what is possible for race day, and are we going to try and chase after that?
Yeah, absolutely. We are going to do, like, closer to race day, an episode on that, on setting goals and on really honing in on that stuff. We're still 5 weeks out, as Dev says, and there's time for change there. So stay tuned. We will be focusing on that. But Dev, from a pacing perspective, I mean, it's a half marathon. And obviously we got people at differing levels. So how would you differ your pacing strategy? Let's say for someone who's running a sub 90 versus someone who's a 2 hour plus. What is the difference in those pacing strategies?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And it is something. Look, the kind of common terminology, and every runner always wants to. We've all heard of a negative split, and every runner wants to run every run we do in a negative split. So I've got people that go out on a 5K and their focus is negative split of 5K time, for example. So on race day, we do our pace calculators. We've got an idea. Obviously, we're talking about pacing strategies and how to work out the exact sort of stuff closer to the time. But when it comes to the differing strategies, I mean, if I use 2 examples, so if you're a sub 90-minute runner, for example, over the distance of a half marathon, and in particular this route, a sub 90-minute runner can probably get away with going out for the first K, maybe first 2Ks quite hard, but then generally settle down into a nice firm rhythm for the race, and we'll be able to run a pretty even split over that run. Okay, so that's quite a hard starting point. But because it's only 90 minutes or sub 90 minutes in this instance, it's something that's sustainable to a large degree. Where if you're a 2 hour plus runner or a 2.5 hour plus runner, there's a lot more time on your feet, and you're definitely not going to be able to sustain that kind of effort for very long. So you definitely don't want to go out as hard as what a sub 90-minute runner would have been, for example. You're not going out fast. You're going out much more conservative, thinking towards the second half of the race. Keep in mind here, Southern Cross Drive is probably the toughest point of this route, okay? And that unfortunately comes towards the end of the race. So now it's important that we are saving enough in the tank and in the legs for Southern Cross Drive and for the second half of the race as a whole. So more work is needed in the second half. So for us to go out too hard and get the pacing strategy wrong because we're trying to bank time, for example, we are going to pay with interest later on into the race. Unfortunately, when it comes to half marathons, and longer, there's no such thing as banking time. You in a 5K or a 10K can maybe get away with going out as hard as you possibly can and just hanging on for dear life. But when we are talking, especially if you're a 2 hour plus runner for a half marathon distance, there's no such thing. So for the half marathon, if you are a 2 hour plus runner, you're going to run roughly an even split. There might be a slight positive split to this. Obviously, if you've got your strategy right and you have been more conservative in the first half of the race, even though it is the easiest half of the race, because it's the easiest half, because you've been conservative, hopefully with great nutrition and everything on point as well, means you've saved enough in the tank and the legs for when we do hit Southern Cross Drive and the latter part of the race, where you can now push more of a higher relative intensity later into the race. Yeah. So that's the theory of the pacing. Obviously, keeping in mind, walk breaks are something that we've spoken about in the past. It's something that I hope you've already been playing around with it in your training sessions, but it is also something that we are going to employ on race day and into your strategy on race day. So you definitely don't want to be scared of walk breaks. Breaking up Southern Cross Drive, for example. So whatever works for you, whether it's 1 minute on, 1 minute off, 2 minutes on, 1 minute off, whatever the strategy is, but break it up again, saving the legs for the top so that you can maybe push for a slightly stronger finish. But not just waiting till Southern Cross Drive, obviously, for those walk breaks. It's start early and often and make sure that the walk breaks are, again, you're thinking for later into the race. You want to be saving the legs for later into the race when you can hopefully have a strong finish and a smile on your face when you cross that finish line still.
Yeah, spot on, David. And I mean, this is the thing is that, yes, and you and I have definitely avoided the saying in this podcast that it's only a half marathon. I absolutely hate that. So it's a half marathon, but being a half marathon or a marathon or the ultra, it's so key. Your training could go perfectly well. You could control everything. You can control all your controllables. But if you have the wrong strategy on the day, your race is, you're really throwing that race away. And so, guys, it's really, really key that you have a good strategy for this pacing, how you want to run the race. And just to mention here that Dev and I will both be at the Two Oceans Expo. So come and chat to us, come and get a strategy on how to run this race. We'll talk you through different goals and help you figure out a feasible goal and then give you a good idea as to, how to pace that. And we will be selling pacing charts on the day as well, so that they fit around your wrist, so you don't have to memorize all of this. I mean, I can't do maths on the best occasions, let alone when I'm running. So it's really, really super easy. So come and chat to us at the expo, and we'll help you with this strategy, because this is something that you don't want to just leave by the wayside. You don't want this to ruin your race after 12 weeks of good training. So yeah, come and chat to us.
Yeah, I think 100%. Sorry, Sean, just on that, if I can just kind of echo that at the expo. So there are those pacing charts, we will be doing pre-sales on them. So some of you might have an idea already. Okay, I'm on track for a 2 hour, I'm on track for a 90-minute. This is what I want. You're welcome to pre-order those. But if you are sitting on the fence, or you could be between times, or you're not quite confident in what your ability is, that's where we will be there at the expo for that discussion. And we'll be printing pacing charts on demand as well. So if you don't feel that you need to panic and just select a random time, very often we've got guys that play around with a plan A and a plan B as well. So if things aren't going according to plan on the day, you can always default to a plan B, for example. So those are the kind of things we can discuss closer to the time.
Oh yeah, brilliant. I love that. Plan A, plan B. It's so key for that, because if you had a bad night's sleep, or exactly. Weather, wind. I mean, Cape Town, we live in the half LTO in Gauteng and Pretoria, but Cape Town weather, man, I don't know how you guys deal with that. So weather could come into play. So many things. But yes, we'll discuss those as we get closer to race day. But keep an eye out, guys, for this strategy. I think it's going to be really, really key. Dev, I want to just touch on something, and we get this question all the time. Like guys will go and run a race and then turn around and say, oh, well, the race was measured incorrectly because my Garmin said that it said 22 Ks, or or so despondent because my Garmin told me, or my watch told me that I was at 10K. Meanwhile, I could see the 10K marker up ahead. Talk about utilizing your watch in the best way that you can on race day. How do we make this work for us and not freak us out even more?
If you're over 50 and want to recover from sessions faster, run pain and injury free, and improve your endurance, then be sure to join Lindsay and I for our upcoming Faster Beyond 50 Masterclass. In it, we'll show you how we helped a 70-year-old run a 47-minute, 18-second 10K, and how you can take those exact same principles and apply them in your training. Simply scan the QR code that's on screen right now, or click on the link in the description below to save your seat in the training now. We look forward to seeing you there.
Yeah, so this is a good one. I see it in every single race I do. And funnily enough, this last weekend I was running with my training partner, and he uses a completely different device to what I do. We did a 10K run, and we finished the run. And in the 10K distance, his device actually measured 12 kilometers and mine measured 10. So a 2-kilometer difference in a pre-mapped route. So I mapped the route online before, so I know it was a 10K route, it was close to it. But it just goes to show how far different devices can be out on GPS readings. As much as GPS is a great tool, it is still not always 100% accurate. And even your device from day to day can change as well in terms of how accurate its reading is, in terms of picking up satellites where there might be interruption. If you are running in built up areas, it can affect the GPS readings as well. So don't rely 100% on your watch's distance. Rely more on the route markers. A sanctioned race like the Two Oceans Half Marathon or the Ultra, being a sanctioned event, those route markers are accurate. If everything has gone according to plan, the official should have used a trundle wheel to actually measure that route out. So when you get to those route boards and it says 10Ks or 11Ks or 12Ks, you can be 99.9% sure that that is the 10K or 12K mark. And ultimately, the time, keep in mind, GPS affects your average pace or your pacing and what your watch is reading. So if you're now going out and you're running, following your watch's pace, and in my example with my partner last weekend where he was sitting there at 2Ks out, we had over a minute average pace difference between the two of us, and we were running together the whole way. So that can throw your whole strategy up on race day. And that's why our pacing charts that we spoke about now take that out of the equation. The pacing charts have got the route markers on it, so we work them in 5K splits or 3K splits, and an elapsed time. Remember, time is a constant, so if you start your watch, time doesn't change. It keeps ticking over for everyone exactly the same, regardless of everyone else's GPS that's out. So if you're sticking to the elapsed time on your watch and the route markers on the day, that's what you should be looking at. So you want to get to 5Ks as close to what your watch says from a timing point of view. Don't panic, and definitely don't get despondent about it. I do know a lot of people you're running and you kind of think, yeah, geez, I'm so excited. There's only 1K left to go. Meanwhile, 300 meters up the road, you then only go past the 20K marker and you think to yourself, well, geez, I'm just still not there. So definitely don't get despondent. I usually recommend to my clients, change the screen on your device. I mean, most of the devices, you can customize what you see. For race day, I generally just get the guys to set that up so that you're only seeing time. Possibly have average pace on there just as a rough guideline, but again, you're not hanging on to average pace. Remember, things are going to change at different points throughout the route as well. So yeah, elapsed time is the kind of thing I have running there. Take off auto lap, so you don't want auto lap on your watch, because again, if that starts ticking over every kilometer based on GPS, it's going to mess things up for you. What you can do, though, if you do want to use those splits, so for example, if I'm not mistaken, our pacing charts for the half is a 3K split. If you're working on the 3K splits, what you can do is manually lap your watch when you get to the 3K board and the 6K board and the 9K board, because that can then give you, all right, what is your average pace for that last split? Is it on track to what your time was for what the pacing chart is? So the idea here is to take the panic out of the equation, take, as Shona mentioned, the calculations and the mathematics and everything when your brain's tired and really not able to do anything. You're taking all that out the equation so you can really just focus on what's the race board, what's my time, all right, I'm on track, let's keep going, or I need to adjust accordingly.
Yeah, spot on. And just to echo what you're saying there, it's quite key, guys. I mean, people argue with us about, no, my watch was right, this race distance was wrong. And Dev mentioned that a sanctioned event like Two Oceans is going to make sure that their distance markers are correct. But just note this, that those distance markers are measured in the straightest line possible, right? So we don't run in that because it's very often, quite crowded. And so, yes, you might be running slightly skewer, and that's also why it does come out a little bit different. But yeah, so don't rely on that and don't get despondent with that. But Dev, to move on to the second aspect of a good race strategy, and part of that is to have a sound nutrition strategy. Again, this is something that's in our control. We can control the nutrition that we take in. And again, it can also be I don't want to fearmonger people here, but it's a make or break. If you get your nutrition wrong on race day, this is something that can really affect your day. So yeah, talk us through what we should be thinking about for now with our nutrition.
Yeah, definitely. I know we have done a whole nutrition podcast, so definitely go and listen to that as well. But this is the time. So we've talked about these long runs and the long runs being a good opportunity for us to practice that strategy or the nutrition strategy. Hopefully by now you've found something that's worked. You might not have honed it in 100% yet and refined it, but you're on track for what is working, what isn't working. To give an example, I've had a race recently. I did a half marathon purely as a training run, and I was playing around with trying to take in a little bit more. It was a really hot and humid day. I didn't think that side of the equation. So I was trying to take in more gels, more nutrition, but neglected my hydration a little bit. So while I was drinking water in that en route, because it was so hot, I wasn't taking in enough fluid for the amount of nutrition I was taking in. And as a result, I really struggled in the last 5 to 6 Ks, especially with nausea. And I just felt I had nothing left in the tank. That might be happening now. You might be trying to figure out, well, I'm eating, but I'm nauseous, or this isn't working out. Think about the whole picture. And now is the time. As we mentioned, we've still got 2 big weeks, 2 long runs still to come in the plan. Now's the time to be making those little changes. So if something isn't working for you, or you did have a bad run last weekend where you felt the nutrition, like in my case, you might have tried a little bit more, but you felt sick, and now you think, oh, well, I don't need to eat so much because actually it just makes me feel sick. You need to maybe take on more water. It's been really hot all over the country, really. So make sure that you are thinking about nutrition, hydration, taking on maybe a little bit more electrolytes to help the body absorb those fluids as well. So I think that's really key. You're not out of time yet. We've still got time, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't be fixing it now. Now's the time to fix it, get it right, so that you're not experiencing this on race day and trying to fix things on race day or in race week. With that nutrition strategy, and we will definitely touch on it closer to the time, but you also don't want to be trying new things in race week or on race day where you get to an expo and someone's handing out free samples and you think, oh, well, geez, Steph said I need to try gels and I'm going to try them. At that stage, it's way too late. I need you to be playing around with that now. And like I said, if there are changes to be made, make those changes in the next week or 2.
Brilliant. I'm so glad you mentioned that. I was going to say that, but we'll reiterate that in the coming weeks, and you guys will see us at the expo, and we'll tell you not to try the things that you picked up there. Okay, so that's also key. But Dev, what's your nutrition strategy? Race morning, what's the general recommendation? I mean, I know you and I have chatted about this, and we're different in how we like to do things. But what's the general kind of recommendation for race morning and what you should be eating?
Yeah, I generally like to recommend that someone's having a breakfast or however you take nutrition in. So you should be taking in some form of nutrition in the morning off.
Yes.
But let's call it a breakfast. I like to try and get that in 90 minutes to 2 hours before the race. So I'll always tell people, find what time your race starts, work backwards from that. So let's say 2 hours from race start, not from you getting into the start shoot or getting to the venue or whatever it is. From race start, 2 hours prior to that, you want to have breakfast. That is up to you. Hopefully, again, by now with the long runs, you know what's working. I know if you are anything like Shona and myself, I know you're not waking up 2 hours before your long runs on the weekends to have breakfast.
Yeah.
So it's the kind of things where you playing around with things. So maybe now in the next 2 weeks, you also getting a feel for that. So try and either push your run a little bit later or play around with the idea, even if it's just one of the long runs, waking up early enough to have that breakfast 2 hours, 90 minutes to 2 hours before. And that can be something a little bit more substantial. So whether that's a piece of toast with egg on it or oats or pro-neutral, whatever you want.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you what you need to eat, but it's something that's a little bit more substantial. And the reason we do 90 minutes to 2 hours before is there is still enough time in that period for that to digest. So it's not as though you're starting the race on a heavy stomach. And that's the biggest reason people don't eat breakfast, is they kind of feel, well, if I'm going to run in an hour's time or half an hour's time, I can't have a big meal. You can have something a little bit more substantial. What we then recommend is in the hour before the race, because you've eaten so far before, in the hour before, you could be sipping on an energy drink. So again, something you hopefully have played around with and have tried, but something that you're just kind of sipping on, because at the same time, you're keeping up your hydration before the start. The last thing you want to do is now get to the start and you've got your race day nutrition on point and everything's ready to rock and roll in the race. But now you've eaten 2 hours before, you haven't had anything to eat or anything to drink in that 2 hour window. Plus, you're only going to probably start eating 40 minutes into the run. So now you're nearly 3 hours deep into the run. You've already been running for 40 minutes before you take something on. So that's why in that hour before, sip on something. Make sure you're still topping up the tank with carbohydrates, fluid as well, so that when you do start this race, you're in full tank, ready to rock and roll and get cracking on race day.
Yeah, awesome. And maybe just on that, we'll touch on this again closer to the time. You know, check your times for these things. Check traffic, especially if you're not from Cape Town and you don't know where to go and what to do. You know, start looking at that stuff now. And again, we'll have an episode closer to the time where we dive into some of that stuff. But yeah, Dev. And then I've spoke to a couple of people this weekend. Perhaps running, training. I mean, like I say, we're 5 weeks out, and there's a few of my clients, anyways, who also have like some niggling injuries. They're not injuries that are keeping them out, but I woke up with a sore knee and my knee was still sore while I was running, or like what's your view there? Because we are close, so this is almost touch and go, right? 5 weeks out, do we keep pushing through? Do we what do we do in this situation?
Yeah, again, we have said it before, but now's the time to get it sorted. As I mentioned earlier in this podcast, we have done the bulk of the training. Okay, so if we've been nice and consistent up to now, most of the training is already in the system, in the legs. We're conditioned pretty well. For you now to lose a couple of days because you are struggling with a bit of pain or a slight injury is really not the end of the world. If you lose 3 to 4, even 5 days this week, being a recovery week, even better, because we lower load training anyway. Now's the time to take the time off, let the body heal, go and see a doctor or a physio if you need to, and just make sure we are getting that sorted out. It might be something purely as simple as, because of all the training load you've gone through now, you are a little bit tight, you still have a day job, so you're sitting a fair amount of time, and hips are tight, things are tight, and as a result, it's all funneling down to maybe the knees or the ankles or whatever it is. Go for a massage. And going into recovery week now is a really good time for us to go and get a massage maybe. And I can tell you now, there's a high likelihood that you actually don't have an injury. It's just something that the body's going, hey, please, I just need some sort of love and maintenance. So that's something to play around with, but now's the time to get it sorted out. You don't want to be carrying this niggle and it becomes something more serious where you start getting to your taper or you start getting to race week and you're thinking, oh, geez, I don't know how I'm going to start this race because my calf is absolutely killing me. And you've just been trying to push, because then it's really is sort of, I hate using the word junk miles, but it is almost junk miles. You trying to train through the injury and potentially just making it worse at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So guys, go and get those sorted now, right? We don't want to start the race. You also don't want to go into the next block, your last block of training with an injury or a niggle. So go get those sorted now. But yeah, hopefully you got a ton of value from today. Pacing and nutrition are 2 key strategies to help you through your race day. Guys, we are going to be focusing on a couple of things in the next few weeks. Things like going through the routes, helping you really figure out the strategy for that. Things like some tapering strategies. So be sure to keep an eye on the podcast. Share it with your friends. Share it with your running groups. And really like get a ton of value. We're coming into crunch time now, so let's make some smart decisions. But yeah, looking forward to the next couple of weeks. Dev, thank you so much for your time and expertise as always. And yeah, we'll see you guys all next week.
Cool, guys. Enjoy the recovery week.